Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Polacek, an artist and educator in Prague, Czech Republic, and today I'm going to be reacting to another one of these videos that talks about how they made a living as an artist. So I'm interested in how to make a living as an artist because I run a little shop here in Prague where I sell mainly t-shirts that I make, custom t-shirts that I make, one-of-one t-shirts. I also got postcards. If you want to support the channel, get a postcard. I will send you a postcard for $20. Look at how pretty these things are, right? Anyway, the link for the postcards is down in the description. But today we're going to be looking at another video entitled How I Made a Living as an Artist Without Selling My Soul, the bedroom test. And I kind of like watching these videos. It's not like I'm being antagonistic to the people that are making them, but by watching these videos and reacting to them, it also gives me an opportunity to talk about how I've been able to navigate the art world and survive as an artist. All these people are like, thrive, don't just survive. I'm definitely still on survival mode, and I feel like I'm working pretty hard. But of course, perhaps I'm just not doing all the right things. I got to do the right things, right? So let's get into this video. Her name is Helen Norton, and let's see what she has to say about how she made a living as an artist. And
he showed
if you
to me
can
and he
too.
said, look at this. And I said, oh, wow, that's from ages ago. That's from 10 years ago. And he said, when I was studying to be a heart surgeon, this was all I could afford. I loved it so much. Things were going great. Lots of paintings sold. This great big one in front of me. I was standing there and this guy came up with his partner. He was fussing around with something. He pulled out this dog-eared card. It was a postcard, and he showed it to me and he said, look at this. And I said, oh, wow, that's from ages ago. That's from 10 years ago. And he said, when I was studying to be a heart surgeon, this was all I could afford. I loved it so much that I pegged it up on my wall, and I swore that one day, when I finally became a surgeon, I would buy one of your paintings. And that man and his wife had just purchased a major painting at that exhibition off the wall. He was now a heart surgeon, he had plenty of money, and he was a very happy man.
Okay. There are people forget that there are people that, she's talking about this story of when her husband, or when a collector came up to her and he had a postcard and he wanted to get one of her paintings for a long time and it was a goal of his. I could see that as possible because, there are paintings that impact people at certain points in their life, and when you're dealing with emotions and kind of transmitting yourself onto the canvas, it's going to resonate with people in different ways. And I've had surprisingly, people that I wouldn't guess that want to collect my work and buy my work. I've had people in similar situations as that where I'm kind of surprised that they're positioning themselves to buy one of my works, and it takes them a long time. There's a couple different types of buyers as well. Of course, there's people who just have money. I've sold to very, very rich people. I sold to Chad Hurley, who's the co-founder of YouTube. I've sold to Saudi Prince before. That was kind of fun, watching it clear customs and all that sort of stuff. So there's people who have money that just kind of spend money, and I don't know how much they like it. But then there's also people who really value the work, and they're such nerds for certain painters, and they're following many different painters perhaps, and they're going to just buy a work because it's something that moves them, right? In this case, it could be somebody who saw something while they were in school or something like that, right? And they wanted to get one of these pieces because it reminds them of that time period, right? And I have painters that nobody really cares about necessarily, certainly not like big market mover type painters, but I do value having their paintings just for what they represented to me in that point of time in my life. And now I have that thing on the wall still, and it's a constant reminder of that moment too. All right, how to make money.
Want to wake up and look at this thing on my easel day after day after day for 10 or 20 years.
Okay. Yeah.
In last week's video, I delivered some really depressing news, and that was how you could have sales of $100,000 in a commercial gallery, and after you take all your expenses off, gallery commission, etc., it ends up sometimes less than $15,000. And if you
$15,000,
okay, end up in quite a lot of debt. A lot of you were horrified.
This claim you went from $100,000 of sales down to $15,000. I don't know. I guess you take tax, and then then you take the 50%, so all of a sudden you're at $50,000. Then you tax that, then you're at $35,000. It gets small quick. Yeah, that's true.
And said that I smashed your dreams.
I had a friend who was a sculptor, and I remember he got a commission. It was a $120,000 commission, and I was like, "Wow, or you must be really excited that you got this big commission." And he was kind of like, "Yeah, well, when I'm done with it all, it'll be about $10,000-15,000." So that's kind of on point with this. But he also had to get like engineers to like sign off on like structural limitations because it was a public sculpture and these sorts of things. He had to work with architects. He had to work with all sorts of different zoning. I don't know what they call it for public work stuff. So he had a lot of people to pay, and then he probably ended up with $15,000 out of that $120,000 commission.
But I promised you some good news in this video, and I wanted to share with you what I actually did to make a pretty good living out of art without actually doing other jobs on the side. There were times I felt like I was selling my soul, but the bulk of it I really enjoyed. My methods aren't standard. I didn't have a formal arts training, so I wasn't playing any games when I started. I just used my noggin, my common sense, and I followed my...
The Aussies, I'm kind of biased just to Australians in general, I think, perhaps, because I always kind of like this straightforward approach. I meet a lot of different people from all over the world here in Prague, and the Aussies that I've met have generally kind of been pretty straightforward and pretty fun. And so I'm kind of biased towards her in this respect, where she's just like, I just used my noggin and I figured out my own path. Apparently didn't go to school for painting, but we'll see.
My nose right from the start because I was outside the industry and I was isolated. And that was probably my main superpower, being isolated. I really did not just survive, but I thrived because I had other money making going on outside the galleries. But I always knew that the galleries were important to build the CV and reputation. That's the irony of it. I built...
Okay, so this is, the point of having galleries. Artists are trapped in this problem, and I'm trapped in this problem too. It's not something that, doesn't go away at a certain point. But there's a problem that once you get represented by a gallery, all your work, not all of it, depends on the contract that you sign, but your work should be going through that gallery. And as soon as they start selling your paintings for $2,000 a painting or whatever, you have to start charging the same amount for your paintings. Even out of your studio, you shouldn't be giving deals because that painting is worth $2,000. You should treat it as a painting that's worth about $2,000. And what a gallery can do, which is really nice because they have access to rich people that collect art, is they can maintain this sort of price, and then they sell your work at $2,000 for 2-3 years, and then it goes to $2,500. You put it up at auction, and then you get a history of, how much it sold there, and you're hoping the whole time this is a painting that's worth $2,500. Even for really, it can really even be for $2,500 paintings, and in these types of works, it's not all $40,000 paintings or $40 million paintings. There is a market for $600 paintings, right? $200 paintings. These sorts of things. I'm flooding the market because I paint too much. That could be one of my problems. I should just do one big painting a month instead of, drawing on postcards and making works on paper and then doing my, typical panel pieces as well. So, that's kind of a problem. I make too much stuff. So when she talks about this gallery split, I think she's alluding to the fact that she's creating her own opportunities. She doesn't come from the art world, and she wants to make her own opportunities herself.
A system to sell directly to people, but I didn't plan that all carefully. It kind of just happened.
It didn't just happen.
So now I can give you my insight into what it was when I look back, and that's what I want to do today. There were some key points, and I can actually nail them down and deliver them to you. I believe in doing work from the soul. It's not about selling out. There is commercial awareness. You've got to be aware of the market. So there's this balance. Now,
okay. How do you time the market? How do you time the market? This goes back to me telling you guys, when you're making your paintings, you can make them really for yourself, right? How do you time the market? And she's talking about, you shouldn't sell out. Why, think about this for a minute. Why does something get kind of crappier the more famous a band gets? Why is their first album always kind of the good one? You know, when we think about it, and it's like a meme, you know, in hipster circles and these sorts of things, where it's like, oh yeah, I really like their early work before they sold out. You know, and it's like, what? But it's kind of true as well. Something weird happens where they get money and they just get a couple people in their ears asking them to tweak this and just move this around a little bit. Unless you're a mega superstar like Taylor Swift or something like that, then you can certainly dictate your terms. But if you're an up and coming, you know, punk band, they're gonna even nudge you a little bit, right? And you lose some of your edge as you start to listen to these people a little bit more and more. And it's often like, how many novels does a person have in them? Think about it like that, right? I wrote a book. You can get it. You can actually get my book. It's a science fiction book. I'm writing a prequel for it now. But that book, you know, is my prequel going to suck? Maybe. But I sold 18 copies of it. I was happy. You know, I thought I was going to sell 2. I just wrote it for myself. I didn't write it for anybody else. I don't care about it. It's nothing you know, it's like somebody was asking me the other day, would you ever try stand-up comedy? And I was like, yeah, I tried stand-up comedy. It sucked. I was bad at it. And they're like, oh my God, that's my worst nightmare. I'm like, why should I care? I'm not trying to be a stand-up comic. If I suck at stand-up comedy, that's nothing I should worry about. It's not a traumatic event for me to suck at stand-up, right? So you can think of art in kind of a similar way. You have more on the line, obviously, when your identity gets bound up in your paintings and these sorts of things. But when you talk about selling out and listening to what the market wants, I kind of don't like where this is headed already, because I don't think you should. I really, honestly don't think you should. And if you do, if you start copying what you think the market wants, it's going to change anyway in a year. You know, what are you just going to chase trends forever?
Now, there is one specific question, a leading golden solution that I ask every time, right from the start of my career, my first painting. This is the number one secret. Now, when I tell you this, don't start thinking, oh, that's a sellout, that contradicts everything you said. It's not. I have to tell it to you simply to get it across, but you need to just not panic when I do. This is so pure common sense.
Good.
It almost defies belief.
Tell me what it is.
I didn't read this in a book. It was just what I knew to be true because I didn't have a formal art degree.
Good.
Right? So I led with this question. I came out of the world of reality. I'd been cleaning roadhouse
Very
toilets,
nice.
sweeping floors,
I used to sell popcorn.
In the middle
What's
of the
rule?
desert. I'd been a stock camp cook. I wasn't an artist. I was coming at it from a different perspective. I would look at the painting on my easel or on my table and I would ask one question. Would a stranger want to wake up and look at this thing on my easel day after day after day for 10 or 20 years?
That's kind of a fun question. You know, when you sell a work, when you make a work or put it out into the world, it is something somebody has to live with, and they're kind of a custodian of this thing in a way. You know, they don't want to damage it. They'll probably hand it down, like I've said before. You'll find paintings at thrift stores and places like this, flea markets, because paintings, they kind of, even a bad oil painting kind of has a long lifespan. You know, it is an archival medium, so it's not going to get, you know, if you follow some pretty basic rules, oil on canvas will last centuries and centuries. So there is a question, you know, what is this person buying? Are they putting it on their wall? How much do they look at the paintings on their walls? You know, I could live with a Grunewald crucifixion by my bed, and I'd wake up and I'd be like, wow. I mean, if you're not familiar, some of Grunewald's crucifixions, Jesus is very like diseased looking and his flesh is falling off and these sorts of things. It's a very dead, he's meant to look very dead and decaying and this sort of stuff. I would live with that. I'd be happy. I'd be happy to wake up to that. Be like, wow, I got a Grunewald. Let's go. So it depends on the person, right?
This is a core question on how you work out what to put out there and what to keep back in here. Try to imagine this. If you can't work out why people aren't buying your work, just ask that question. Are you mixing up the expression of your internal contents, your soul work, with this other desire you have, which is to sell your work to complete strangers? This question is pretty much the pub test.
Okay. She's talking about this soul work stuff. Right. And she's trying to kind of separate this idea of what she calls soul work, which treats art almost like therapy in some way, right? That art is a way of digging into yourself, and the sense that she says it's work, soul work, it does give kind of a therapy sort of connotation to it, to me at least, that you're working on something, you're trying to better yourself through the creation of this work. And that's always not the goal, I don't think. But it is an interesting question. Why does a normal, otherwise normal person, whatever we call them, when they go to a paint and sip, for instance, and they have wine and they have a 3-hour event, I don't know how long they are, maybe, 2 or 3 hours, I imagine, and they have to paint a still life of some grapes and a wine bottle and some bread. Maybe not bread. Bread's a pain in the ass to paint. But yeah, they have to paint some grapes in a bottle. You could do that. You could teach somebody how to do that. They're going to take that painting home. They're going to put the painting on the wall. Maybe. It's probably about the kind of community aspect of the event. I think, when you're painting, you can kind of disconnect a little bit from the creation of the work. And so, are they really doing any type of soul work? Not really. It's like a community gathering. I suppose soul work could be when you're painting by yourself and you've got certain themes from your life that you want to express into the painting. And that sounds good. I'm with that. I'm on team soul work, I guess. And trying to figure out what the market wants is going to be very difficult because, like I said, I'm happy with my Grunewald on the wall. Grunewald crucifixion. I'll do
as
that.
we call it in Australia. Does it
pub
pass
test.
the pub test? This is
What is this?
ground zero, wake up. Imagine someone has
Can you
just
talk
walked out
about it in a pub?
$2,000 for this thing. Just look at it on the easel, okay? Just look at it. Stand back and ask yourself, would you pay $2,000 for that? Would you pay that much money for that
Depends how
painting?
much money
and
I
if you
got.
did pay it, would you have so much faith in that image that you would come out every morning, even if you've had a rough night, it's hanging on your living room wall, and would you be happy that you had forked that money out for 10, 20 years? Ask it upside down, whichever way you want, but that's the question.
Okay. Yeah, I think I answered this. Depends on the person. It depends on how much money they have.
Question that bites every other question in half and spits it out with the bones. It's as serious as it gets. This is where you step aside from, some sort of commercial perspective in your head and you reframe yourself with empathy for the viewer. Step into their shoes. Know the difference. It doesn't mean that you're...
Okay. Art history's rough. Maybe it's because I'm in Prague and I'm surrounded by a lot of these, you can even see medieval pieces here and high Renaissance pieces here and Baroque pieces here, and a lot of it's pretty rough. There's a lot of dead people, it's not the happiest of histories. Art history, human history, anywhere in Europe has been pretty rough, So I guess it defines what a painting is. If a painting is a decoration and you're looking at it decoratively in a house, then that's a consideration. But I want paintings that deal with difficult subjects. I suppose not everybody does, and that's the point, that we want to have Thomas Kincaid paintings of little cabins with warm lights inside of them. I don't know. That's not what painting is to me. Sorry.
soul work is invalid. But the more you
Soul
get that
work again.
formula
She uses that
correct,
a lot.
the better you're going to do in the world. The more you can get what you're feeling inside onto that canvas, onto that easel, and ask that question and have a yes, you're set for success. The purge that we have to do in our soul work, our deep spiritual work, that may well belong in your morning pages.
I mean, there's simply there's a lot of very difficult painters that do very well. Just off the top of my head, Christian Rex Van Minnen is somebody worth checking out, and he deals a lot with the grotesque, and he does very well just as a painter, extremely well. And he sells to very wealthy people, I'm sure, because his paintings are going for $60,000, $40,000 to $60,000 each. And he's doing, a lot of lithographs and these, in this day and age, everything is niche oriented already, right? Everything is already niche oriented. It's like you can't just be into rock climbing. You have to be into nude free climbing, right? Nude solo free climbing. You could make an entire community and YouTube videos based all on nude solo free climbing stuff and still find enough people. So to gauge, what does the pub test, if you go down to the pub, are they gonna, bust your balls over a funny looking painting? I don't know. I've had, I'm in a weird position where I have a shop, and I sell t-shirts in this shop. And I've gone through different ways of thinking about it, how I present it, because I have these strange t-shirts that I made, unique screen print designs that I hand stitch. I use the sewing machine to draw stuff onto them and stuff like that. Links down in the description. There's some available in the store as well. But I have a shop and I sell these types of t-shirts, but as you can see behind me, I paint here as well. This is where I make my paintings. So in the back of the shop, when nobody's coming in, I can paint, and I can sit here and I paint, and it's like my studio. And then when people come in, I talk with them, I help them out, and they try on stuff, whatever. And sometimes they'll see my paintings. Sometimes they don't notice it at all. I've had instances where people come in and they're actually surprised when they see the paintings, even though they're everywhere on the walls. But their mind is so focused on, whatever the Pikachu shirt in the window that they came in for. And then they're like, oh, wow, there's stuff in here, And one time I had this bodybuilder guy come in, ripped, summertime, tank top on, the bodybuilder guy that knows he's got huge shoulders and big muscles and all this sorts of stuff. And he's coming in here and he's looking at my paintings. And I'm thinking, stereotyping in my head, I got a gym bro in here, right? I'm going to have a conversation with him about painting. And he, not that he loved my paintings or that he bought one of my paintings, which also happened. This is one of those instances where somebody came in, maybe thinking about spending $15 and they end up spending $200, $300. But how would I pin? If I was trying to make a painting for him, it would have looked nothing like my ridiculous, insane paintings that I make, right? And I can't help it. I think a lot of painters really just can't help but paint the way they paint. It's not like something we just get to change, and that's why it's important when you're working with students and working with artists to let them know they have the full authority. That's what this whole idea of, the artist's way and morning pages, it's amazing how popular that book is and how much runtime it's got. But that's what it's all about. It's about really kind of dumping your head and dumping your thoughts out onto the page and not really caring about stuff. So it seems a little bit contradictory in the messaging here.
And that could be visual or written. For some silly reason, artists can very easily get into this mindset of marketability as some sort of dirty word. It's not. In my earlier videos, I hinted towards formulaic stuff, but that's not what I'm talking about. That's when artists become lazy. They're still going to make money. Good on them. And it's also that we quickly attack.
They're not going to make money. Most of you aren't going to make money. I'm sorry. It's okay. We can say it out loud. I know in the life coach realm, everyone's supposed to be able to make money. it's hard. It's really hard to make money painting. You know? All these I'm so skeptical. Like, I'm not speaking about this woman particularly, but I'm so skeptical of so many of these people online kind of giving advice or life coach type of advice and their story. And we know, like, most of these tech startup stories are absolute bullshit. Right? You can read articles about how most tech startup stories are bullshit. The idea of the tech startup in the garage and this sort of stuff. A lot of these startups have millions and millions and millions of dollars when they start up. And everybody loves the underdog story, so everybody says it. But I can't help but think, sometimes people have just a little bit of support. And a lot of times artists, if we look at the history of art, there's a lot of men, if you haven't noticed, in the history of art. There's also a lot of women, of course. There's a great book called Art History Without Men, actually. You should check out. It's just all women artists. It's awesome. But there's been a long history of men in art. And a lot of times, their wives are the ones doing all the accounting. They're putting the food on the table. Sometimes they have jobs as, lawyers or accountants or whatever. And they're sustaining those guys. Just read the story of a lot of artists. Some of them are big and they get big patrons and this sort of stuff, and they make good money. And others, a lot of times their spouse, and a lot of times that's a woman, is the one helping them out, right? And so everyone's in a different place financially. I come from a very modest background, okay? And with that, like my father was a professor at a place called United Tribes, and that was like a Native American university, technical college. And my mother ran a nonprofit organization. So we had like a pretty normal, standard middle class upbringing. My grandparents on both sides were farmers. And so I kind of value people's money in different ways. I guess like $10,000 to start, your plan for 1 year. That's a lot of money to a lot of people. Even if you have $10,000 to cushion you, that helps people out a lot.
This thought to painting things that are trendy. This is more decorator work, blue to match the sofa or something like that. Everything's not just
addressing
black and
what I
white.
said.
So I guess the sole question is, if the answer to my question is no, when you're looking at that picture on the easel, perhaps this artwork is too deep for the market. It's too subjective.
Too deep.
And perhaps if you do put it out there and nothing happens, you might not have connected deeply enough to the broader collective consciousness of your audience. You get better at reading that. I think that artists who have good capacity to read people are very good at negotiating this. They pick it up very quickly. But instead of them being more generous or emphatic towards the client, they become either judgmental of the client, saying, you don't understand, you're...
What client? Who are they? You go to a punk show, they're going to have different expectations than the people going to a classical music concert.
Dum-dum, or they judge themselves as being not good enough. It doesn't...
I think it's like... It's almost a type of anti-intellectualism in some ways. They're not dumb. You can go into a pub, and I guarantee you, I'm familiar with the pub test in talking to people in a pub. You can talk about literature. Everyone's got an opinion on movies. That's a very simple way to get into difficult subject matter very quickly. You can talk about some different types of films. You can do like Paul Thomas Anderson. Oh yeah, I love his movies. I love Magnolia. Whatever. Some people might hate him. I don't. People are more open than you think. Really, people watch difficult things. People listen to difficult things. People can, it's hard because a lot of people don't read. That's a problem. But people, it's this idea that art is a scam, kind of. That's why it rubs me the wrong way. It's this idea like if you go in and show a Jackson Pollock painting in a pub, they'll be like, oh yeah, my kid could do that. And then you're supposed to like change how you paint.
didn't mean to kind of get up off the ground and do another one. So that is what I call the bedroom test. It is really about respecting the sanctuary of someone's home. Think about if you were in their position. Artists know when they've been exhibiting a lot of work and selling a lot of work.
On my wall.
There's nothing like seeing your artwork in other people's homes.
Every day.
It gives you this completely different perspective. So my life changed when I got out of that super narcissistic kind of strategy or feeling of everything I do is golden. I don't think I ever really got into that. And start painting with this question in mind. It's a bit more considerate. And the trouble is when you're coming out of a university system, you're taught the complete opposite to that. You're painting for an academic's approval, and there's nothing to do with money. It's a completely different thing going on.
That is an interesting divide. I'm noticing a lot of these people that keep bubbling up talk about how they weren't educated in a university. I get what she's saying in the fact that a lot of times academia has come into painting and drawing and these sorts of things, and they're kind of often saying that a text is very important to kind of buttress your work, right? And that you need this very intelligent text. I think a huge, interesting problem right now is with ChatGPT and AI, and the quality of these statements has become way better because artists suck at writing artist statements, right? You know who's really good at writing artist statements? Writers. Okay? If you want somebody to write your artist statement, this isn't a new idea, right? If you get into a gallery, if you get into a good gallery, they're going to have somebody else write your artist statement because they're going to get somebody who knows how to write. And ChatGPT has lowered the bar for this considerably for kind of like amateur level painters, you know, and just normal people that want to make work. And to go from this clunky attempt to kind of sound lofty and smart to, you know, if you give the right prompt, of course, and keep it very, very simple in the text, your artist statement's probably a lot better. And a lot of artists didn't care about writing these things anyway. You know, it wasn't something they liked doing. So this sort of division of academia, the text versus the work, I think that's kind of breaking down now. But I do sense a little bit of this defensiveness in this video about how these people don't want to, you know, they're trying to say too much about their work or something. I don't necessarily agree with that. I love to go into museums and galleries and look at the work first, and then I read the statement later. That's how I always do it. I want to experience the work. I don't even want to know if it's a man or a woman who painted it. I don't care. I want to look at the work. I want to experience it. I read the text, and then that enhances my understanding of the work. It should. It shouldn't make me, you know, go somewhere else. There can be a division between the text and the painting, but that text should help.
Process is completely different. You see, it's chalk and cheese, but it doesn't mean you have to sell out. So that is basically the core
chalk and
factor.
cheese.
It could almost
Some
just
Aussie
not tell you
stuff.
anything else. If you get that right, it will work. The rest folds in place. However, there are a couple more really significant points to make. Now, you're going to notice I'm being metaphoric here. Stay with me. This one I call be a big frog in a small pond. The biggest problem you have is
Good
the
advice.
flooding of the market, especially with social media. I started my art career in the late 1980s. There was no internet, no websites. All we had was fax machines, mail, letters, and telephones. So how did I actually do it? How did I build a really significant career
Interesting,
at that
but
time?
not relevant
Well, there
now.
is a story. So I'm going to try and summarise it. When I started painting, I was living in a very remote tourist town in Australia. It was right up in the northwest called Broome. Broome was thousands of miles from everything. It was almost the most remote tourist town in Australia. I didn't come to Broome as an artist. I found myself in Broome where I had to stay with my husband because of his trucking business. And then I became an artist in situ through accident, really. When I started, I was painting on pearl shells because I could paint. I just liked painting. I didn't have any great skills. And I just painted little beach scenes. I was painting on t-shirts. It was tourism. I sold these things in little gift shops. And I did it because I could. I had no, tickets on myself to become an artist of, any great note or anything like that. It worked. And then it kind of evolved. I was sort of following my past experience in my life. I spent all these years in the outback living with very strange characters. And it was a very hard life. And so they just started to creep into my paintings. And I accidentally sold a couple. And then a few.
Okay. Started making artwork for a gift shop. That is an entry point. That's an entry point. I don't see anything wrong with that. And I like her overall idea, be a big frog in a small pond. I haven't heard her get to that yet. But
A few other accidental things happened, and it just started to evolve from there. Now, what made me stand out, because there were plenty of other artists there in that tourism town, and it was only 3,000 people, and there was a very small art market, but there were plenty of artists trying to milk it. It was a unique place because of the turquoise blue waters and the red sand hills, all sorts of things that made it stand out. And we had this captive audience. It wasn't there when I first came there. Tourism picked up, and the people that were flying in were coming from Melbourne and Sydney, and they had money, and they were staying at the fancy Cable Beach Club. So it kind of evolved, but I wasn't painting generic tourism paintings, and I was painting these strange things that were true to me from my outback life.
She kind of said they were generic tourist paintings in the beginning of the story.
Landscapey stuff, but it was...
That's not bad. I'm just saying that's kind of what she just said.
Kind of the narrative of what was inside myself and the observations that I saw out there. I just entered every little art competition. We had a regional gallery there. We just had a yearly Shinju Matsuri festival. I just entered all the competitions, and I won lots and lots of them accidentally, and that kind of propelled me.
That's good. Yeah, enter stuff locally. Sure. That's good advice. Enter your stuff in local competitions, local group shows, this sort of stuff. Nothing wrong with that. Why not?
Put paintings in the local art galleries, and they always sold. So every little piece of money that I got, I put it back and bought more materials, after what I had to pay to live. And that was how it built. It just expanded and expanded. I followed my nose, and then I got a reputation, and then I got opportunities because people saw my work. But there was a couple more very tricky little pieces to this. But first, before we move on, just remember this: big frog, small pond. And I was in the same town as a whole lot of other artists, painting some of the landscapes that they were, the beaches, etc. But I injected my X factor, which was my internal work.
This is true. I recommend artists also, don't think about, like, social media is big and it's important, but your local community is also very important in creating the work. So don't ignore the town you're in. I'm lucky I get to be in, a big fancy capital city in Europe, and there's a ton of galleries, there's a ton of shows going on. You can check out my other video just walking through the art school here that I uploaded just a week ago, to get an idea of the different types of paintings and how good you have to be, at painting in order to kind of get attention here. And so that's smart. Thinking locally, think about, where am I now? Who's in this community now? Instead of, I grew up in North Dakota, which is the least visited state in the United States. And it gets insanely cold. Yesterday it was minus 55 there. Okay. So there's a lot of inwardness in North Dakota, right? There's probably a lot of that in other Arctic. It's not an Arctic place, but it seems like it sometimes. Extremely cold places, or maybe extremely inhospitable places where you have to be indoors a lot. And you start looking to the internet to solve a lot of your problems and to reach out and grow and these sorts of things. And a lot of times, the growth will come more locally. And those local connections that you make are extremely important as you go forward. Even if it is a small gift shop in a tourist town, that can be a spot where you test out your paintings,
world and things in my life experience, your story is your voice into those external scenes, and that's what set me aside in the artistic sense.
I'm learning more about this woman. I feel like she certainly has I find it hard to believe she didn't go to university. She has a very particular approach, and words like, big frog in a small pond and these sorts of things. It does feel a little bit like she's selling a book or something like that, which is cool. Nothing wrong with that. But it reminds me of like a table of contents.
Stood out because I was different. You could do that in the city. What I want to say to you, stop screaming in the swamp of Instagram where you've got 10 million artists shouting the same thing. You've got to find your little pond. Be the only one doing your specific thing in that space, whatever it is. Think about it. Only you know this. Authenticity is the only way that you're going to stand out when the market's crowded. You can't.
Okay, so I mean, there's a contradiction happening here a little bit. How do you be authentic? yet also appeal to the crowd, right? If I'm a punk musician at heart, but I have to play the violin, it's not going to work, So you're authentic to your people or your tribe, as they say, right?
Can't afford to be a wilting little flower hiding in your basement. This is not what you're probably going to want to hear, but this made me rich, and I mean it. This part is what actually put money
Really?
in my bank account right from the start. It is logistics. Yep. Good old-fashioned logistics. I knew something good would come out of my mum being the mechanic and chief toilet unblocker in the house one day. She was so practical. It was always about logistics. How can you make it happen? We had no picture framers up there. The most basic transport facilities, the Greyhound bus was how you shipped paintings, and it was so expensive. There was no marketing, promotion, or anything like that. As I said, we just had fax machines, telephones, and the mail.
I'm like, you can ship paintings on Greyhound buses? This sounds amazing. It sounds good.
So,
but I think I know where she's headed.
I automatically,
Make do
without
with what you
thinking
got.
twice, solved every logistical problem that could block a client, and even a gallery when I would send work to galleries. I solved all the logistic problems. There was no blockage in the way. They couldn't say, "Oh, the work's not framed." And
True. There is a term for this. It's called gallery ready. Are the pieces gallery ready? And that means the gallery doesn't have to mess around with them. Paintings, people get annoyed by paintings because people buy paintings. But part of the reason I think paintings are still so popular is they're easy to ship. They're not very heavy. Canvas and the wooden stretcher bars are not that heavy. So even big paintings can be rolled up and shipped pretty easily. And you put them on the wall. They don't take up a lot of space. They're on the wall. What do you got on your wall anyway? You don't got anything on your wall, right? That's why you need one of my paintings or one of my postcards. Link in the bio, or link in the description. But, so that's one reason why. And if you have a gallery ready piece, that means you can just take it, put it on the wall. Very simple. Sometimes people have works on paper. Works on paper are annoying. You got to get frames for them. Frames can be expensive. But just canvases, simple canvases, easy. Galleries will put them on their walls. Painters or buyers will just put a painting canvas on their wall. Sure.
I couldn't say, "Oh, I can't afford to get it framed." I didn't try and say, "Oh, it's too hard to ship this painting all the way to Melbourne." I worked out how to do it. I learned how to do packing. I got boxes and made them out of old fridge boxes from the back of the furniture store. I learned how to frame with the most basic materials. It was hard, but I never thought that it was. I just felt excited.
Sure.
I could control every part of the process so that the person would buy a painting and I could actually get it to them within, a couple of weeks, and they didn't have to do anything. I solved all the problems. Same with the galleries. No other artists in Broome
Don't
were
be
able
annoying.
to
This goes back to the old adage, my old adage. Don't be annoying. Okay? If you're an artist and you want to work with people, don't be annoying. Don't annoy the gallery like, "Oh, you guys need to buy this and I need this special sort of hanger and blah, blah. Just don't be annoying. That'll help you. They're more likely to. This is any job, right? Isn't this every job interview ever? Don't be annoying.
Efficiently get their 20 or 30 works from their studio to Sydney. I could, because I worked it all out. It was hard, but I worked it out. Don't pass on the problems, solve it. So what I would do when I got work back, and that was always a bit of a problem, because back then the freight companies would damage everything. Oh, I would get it back. I had a studio, and remember, I'm a big frog in a small pond. I made friends with the woman in the resorts who was catering to all these rich people that were coming to visit, and I offered her the idea to come to the studio.
Isn't it terrible how much, just like these rich people, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, there's rich people, they got money." Doesn't buy taste.
Bring her clients, and then she started up an art round. She would take her clients around to the artists' studios, and boy oh boy did we make ourselves available. And those people were captive audiences. These people had money, so they would come around to our studios, and that's how we made connections. I always had the work there hanging on the wall. Everything I earned I put back into making sure I had beautiful big gallery walls to hang it on. It was studio walls, right? It was just a studio. And that meant it happened. Manifest the reality. My favourite saying in the entire world, and no one seems to know where it came from, is this one: the universe rearranges to accommodate your picture of reality. Just remember that. Put that on your fridge and think about it every day. That was how I was living my life. Now,
I don't know what
in the
that
previous
means.
video, I said that this work loses its value after it
Should we look at it again or just skip? Maybe we skip. No.
goes through a gallery. Well, guess what? Because I was isolated, it didn't. I moved it back to my studio, and if I had full control, I could sell it at whatever price I wanted to sell it at. I could spin the narrative. I could spend time with the clients, telling them about the work. And remember, no internet. Do you know how I sold my work? When people would come to the gallery, the visitors book was always open, always encouraging people. They would write their name down with their address, and if they were interested in buying a painting and I didn't have something they wanted, I called it my system Oz-wide, Australia-wide. I made these little photo albums, and I would get these tiny things and fill them up. I'd get 30 copies of every painting that I had in my stock and fill them up with these photos, and I'd put a price list, and I would post that little Oz-wide album to these clients all around Australia. They would receive in the mail this little photo album with a price list. 99% of the time, they would buy something from that, and they'd send me the album back. That's how I got myself out there with no internet. They had no other way of seeing it. We had no email, nothing. You know what? You've got 10 times more the capacity that I had.
Okay, true, kind of.
Then
People used to have lists of addresses, and they'd send out letters and invitations to shows and stuff like that. If you're in a small community, sure. Now you do it by email. It's harder to get people's attention, In some ways, I don't know if it's easier. I think it's more difficult now because people's attention is so difficult to maintain. If you got a letter back in the day, first of all, you'd have to get somebody's address. People aren't going to be sending their addresses willy-nilly necessarily, right? Unless they're buying one of these handmade postcards. Okay. It's easier,
I'm
maybe.
only telling you these things not to give you impossible gold with a certificate of authenticity or something like that, thanking them for supporting my work. I know some artists still do that.
Secret
now,
weapon,
I'm
let's
tell you
go.
the secret weapon that took me global. This is going to freak you out. You're not even going to believe this. Right at the very beginning of my career, I noticed something. I would do paintings that everybody loved, but only one person could buy them. So straight away you think, okay, Prince, yeah, but...
Random print
I made postcards. Now, there were a few university educated
postcards!
And they used to put me down because...
Now we're talking. Everything she says after this is true.
Sold postcards. They would say, real artists don't sell $2 postcards. Guess what? I sold thousands and thousands. I sold boxes of them, 1995 or even earlier. $30,000 of postcards was annually what I would turn over year after year at $1 each. Back then, people actually sent postcards from their holidays. And in Broome, they would buy a dozen at a time of my cards because they were there. And they would send them all around the world, back home, Germany, France, UK.
Can we...
Annually what I would turn over year after year at $1 each. Back then, people actually sent postcards from their holidays. And in Broome, they would buy a dozen at a time of my cards, 19 notes. Now, there were a few university educated artists in town, and they used to put me down because I sold postcards. They would say, real artists don't sell $2 postcards. Guess what? I sold thousands and thousands. I sold boxes of them, 1995 or even earlier. $30,000 of postcards was annually what I would turn over year after year at $1 each. Back then, people...
$30,000 of postcards? How? I mean, what? Hold on. I do have a calculator because I calculate. $30,000 postcards. So you make $82 on postcards a day. $82 a postcard. You sell 82 postcards a day for $2 each. Because you got to give the shop half. There's 82 people. It seems possible, I guess. 82 people buying your postcards a day? Every day? Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot. Skeptical.
People actually sent postcards from their holidays. And in Broome, they would buy a dozen at a time of my cards because they were there. And they would send them all around the world, back home, Germany, France, UK, United States, China.
There's other postcards available, though. Okay. If you're the postcard person for this shop and you have cornered the postcard market, absolutely, you could do that. There's a lot of different postcards available. That's just one little swivel rack. What happens when there's 40 different postcards on one rack?
Postcards were ambassadors. What did it cost me? $1. And those cards would travel all over the world. You know what's on the back of them? By then, let's say I had a website, it was very, very crude. My website, my actual address in Broome, my name, basically my brand was on the back. That's what I did to travel the world for free. I got paid. Crazy,
That's
isn't
cool.
it? Now, you think that's pretty cool. Listen to this one. This happens more than once, but I'm going to give you one incredible story. If you think postcards are dumb, listen to this.
I
One
don't.
story only
I just
of
think
many.
you sold a lot of them.
I was at my exhibition opening at New Collectibles Gallery in Perth. A wonderful event. Things were going great. Lots of paintings sold, including this great big one in front of me. I was standing there and this guy came up, an Asian chap with his partner. He was fussing around with something. He pulled out
All
this
these.
dog-eared card. It was a postcard. And he showed it to me and he said, look at this. And I said, oh, wow, that's from ages ago. That's from 10 years ago. And he said, when I was studying to be a heart surgeon, this was all I could afford. I loved it so much that I pegged it up on my wall and I swore that one day when I finally became a surgeon, I would buy one of your paintings. And that man and his wife had just purchased a major painting at that exhibition off the wall. He was now a heart surgeon, he had plenty of money, and he was a very happy man. And I could tell you that story over and over because it happened time after time. You'd never know.
There's a reason the galleries don't want you to sometimes get that direct connection to a collector that's buying a lot of your work, because they'll just go to you and you'll give them a deal because you want to buy nachos.
Who you're selling to. You're selling a postcard. You got your nose up in the air and you think, oh, it ain't how it is, baby. It ain't how it is. You just never know. The struggling student buys a postcard and he put it on his toilet wall, mind you, and he stared at it for years. It was like, a symbol. And then he came back and spent $20,000 on one of my paintings. That postcard was a seed. Never ever look down on a small transaction. You're always planting your art in someone's mind. You're letting them aspire to own you. So I did all this with a fax machine. Now, I did that with prints and made print catalogues, and those works went all over the world because they could. And it wasn't like a commercial sellout. The integrity in making prints is far higher than you repainting your best paintings and pretending they're original paintings. And you can still do it today using the modern tools that are at your fingertips. I hope you can extract something from what I've told you. I made
cool.
that work, and I was one of the highest earning artists in Australia at that time. And I did it from a remote town in West Australia. I didn't even have a website, let alone Instagram. We had nothing. I remember clearly our accountant coming one day and forcing me to get this crappy old box computer so I could do the bookwork for our trucking business. I was terrified, but I took it on.
Trucking
You've got the entire world in your
business?
pocket now. You've got no excuse.
How
but
many
you've got
paintings
to remember
are
the
you
system. If
sending?
you respect your own soul work, then maybe try and respect the soul of other people, your client, and just run through those tests. I think the first one, would someone hang this on their wall? Would I hang this on my wall? Pretend or not you. And then you've got to have your big frog in the small pond aspect. Work that out based on today. What's going on today with technology? Very important point, you've got to serve them, right? Take care of logistics. Be a good trader. And don't forget to plant the seeds where you may not think is the ideal place at the time. You don't know how they're going to grow. So you don't need to be beholden to the trap of just working with art galleries, but they're not going to make all your dreams come true. They're just part of it. They'll build your CV in the background. That really is the pragmatic fundamentals
in the
of it.
background.
You can take your creative spirit, your work.
Well, it depends on the gallery. Depends. You get into a real gallery with real money, somebody to frame you, somebody to photograph your work in the right way, somebody to take your own personal picture the right way, to handle the branding, handle the social media rollout to your exhibition. You're not even supposed to share your photos that you're working on of images because you want them to be a surprise, at the exhibition.
Work, your capacity, you can take that well outside the galleries and build. So what I meant in the previous video about that work becoming secondhand after it's not sold in the gallery is that if you leave it in situ in that place, in that area, in that town, and you use that same system to try and sell it, it is going to become, like a drag on your leg. Change how you do things. Recreate yourself all the time. Build your own door and walk through it.
This winter in my home country, Syria.
Sorry. Get through this.
I made this list. When I was sort of brainstorming, what did I do to make money? I'm just going to read it off really fast. It was just like a brainstorm list, and I'll punch it up on the screen. First things that came to my mind. Postcards. I showed up. I solved problems. I was a big frog in a small pond. I said yes all the time. I reached out. I pushed hard for opportunities. I got opportunity because I...
Yeah, these are all good.
I used that to get more leveraged all the time. It always worked. I entered prizes.
I don't know how you leverage it. I'd love to hear, how do you go from painting a shell to selling a $20,000 painting? That's a lot of money for a painting. $20,000 painting. That's a lot. There are rich people that like pretty stuff, and if you have a certain approach, I've been to these people's studios that do these giant paintings that are very pretty, and they do sell them.
Got seen. I got into local commercial galleries when I started. I bit off the small pieces where I could get in. I didn't try and measure myself by getting into some great big gallery at the start. Forget it. Just go where you can get in. Like go to a local cafe. Just get on the wall. Prove yourself up. Lower the bar. Start where you can actually achieve something. Otherwise you'll give up. Drop it down a bit. I did things that others wouldn't do. I didn't follow trends. I said yes outside my comfort zone often. I assumed I could.
A little bit contradictory.
Didn't ever think I couldn't. I tried new things. I started prints because it was logical. The same as postcards. I even printed my own prints. I used to create etchings and collagraphs, anything I could. I got an etching press. I bought it secondhand from an artist. I learned how to do it. I made lots of money from those handmade collagraphs. There were only editions of 50, but it worked. And it was fun. It was something new. I made a catalogue of my work. So I made a print catalogue so I could send it all over the place. People loved that. I made all my own promotional stuff. I'd go around and put posters on the wall, photocopy, I'd write something up on a bit of paper and I'd just stick it everywhere in shopping centres, on your local IGA or shop, wherever you go.
That would be a fun approach. You could do that. I mean, it obviously works well for her because she does have a decorative element to the paintings, no shade. So, if you have that broad of an appeal, it could work, but it could work in a funny way too. I think it would be great if somebody was, a difficult artist, and put up their paintings and they're like paintings for sale. And it's like, a painting of somebody hanging by their foot eating old bags of sand or something. And it's like, come buy a painting, $100. I have 300 of them.
Never stopped me. I worked out how to get around them. And that also cut out a lot of the middlemen, the cost. I treated it all as a really serious business. Once I started working, I reinvested in my business over and over. I bought framing equipment, I got guillotines, I got, V-nailers and everything so I could keep doing it more and more. I think the huge advantage was I was isolated. We had no picture framers at that time. I had to order in all my molding, mat boards. It just gave me more power because then I could produce fast and I could get the end result fast. I would always have this frame thing in my hands.
Framing them herself, that's a pain. That was my first job was as a framer. That's a pain. It's a pain making frames. Mats as well. It's a pain.
Frame it while I was standing there. I created systems that worked for the time. So in there, as I said, it was Ostwide and then prints. And later I made what I called pods, which were where I created this whole print system, which I put out to various art shops where they had all my prints in this little box. They had a catalogue. That was like wholesale business.
I mean, this is a very particular type of artist.
I donated the whole concept of sharing your soul. That probably deserves its own video. I milked opportunities. Like Qantas commissioned me to do the front cover of their in-flight magazine.
Most of these are kind of...
They sent me on the QE, on board the QE. Oh, you see what I mean about logistics? I created this massive machine. In the end, it was too much. I had to shut it all down. But while I was in it, I did it because I created on postage stamps, fax machines, phone calls, and real live people. Making stuff, making it happen. And I don't think that is actually impossible to do right now. I think we are living in an age where people want that now. They want it more than ever. They want the return to the physicality. So think that through. What could you do locally? How can you be a big fish in a little pond?
Okay. It's all right. It's all right advice. Most of it's all right. I think, once again, it depends on who you're making art for. And if you're a little bit more decorative, you're going to have a little bit more luck. Obviously, her proximity, location, for the business to work, being in a tourist town with a massive postcard economy, that helps. It does put the cart before the horse a little bit. And my advice to most of you listening out there is to make the paintings that you want to make. Forget about what anybody else cares about. Maybe if you want to care about something, care about the work being legible, right? That's annoying. That can be annoying when work is claiming to say something that's not present in the work. Right? So maybe if you want to do something concerning the audience, like if you're like, this work is about, my struggle dealing with the fact that I pick my fingernails and I have ADD or something like that, like if that's what you're saying and you don't, and then it's just like pictures of apples or paintings of apples and you're like, what? You said that it was about, like, make the work legible, but I would suggest, trust your audience more and they can deal with complicated subjects. I'm from North Dakota, you know? This is supposedly, you know, the middle of nowhere. And I had no problem talking to people about paintings and art and this sort of stuff. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching another React video. If you want a postcard, let me know. Click the link down in the description. I'm trying that out to find a way to help support me and keep this whole thing going. I'll send you a postcard. And I have a Patreon as well. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there yet, so I'll figure that out later. But thanks a lot for watching. Love you all. I appreciate it. If you exist, write something in the comments so I'm just not talking to bots. That would be amazing too. But I really appreciate it, your time, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be coming back with another one next week, so like and subscribe, and we'll keep the light on for you. Cheers.